Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis, and I'm your host. Today, I have a very good friend of mine that's going to talk to us about leadership, specifically about how to think like a CEO and apply that to your personal finances. His name is Jason LeDuc. He's a 20-year United States Air Force veteran, retired at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in 2015. He started Evo Genius Leadership Consultants to bring the best leadership and strategy lessons from the military to the civilian world. He maintains his growth as a leader through learning the best practices of various industries as he trains government and corporate clients, nonprofit organizations, and small business owners to be effective and dynamic leaders. Jason first got involved in the Las Vegas startup community as a student member of UNLV's Rebel Venture Fund. He's a strong believer in continuing to educate ourselves and is an avid reader and practitioner of leadership, motivation, communication, and behavior. Jason and I actually met at a Toastmasters and been friends ever since. So welcome, Jason.
Welcome. It's great to see you again. We haven't done this in a while. So
thank you. Yeah, it's been a while, man. I missed the Toastmasters, when we had the virtual option. So I actually still need to look for a club. I haven't joined since Vegas. It's been a while.
Well, if you're interested, we've got a couple clubs in Vegas that are doing hybrid or virtual, and I can connect you up with them. So
yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so I'll definitely ask you about that when we're done here. Thank you so much. So before we get into talking about leadership and the CEO mindset, can you tell us just a brief history of your time in the military, and then what inspired you to become a self-employed individual, launch your own company, and help others become better leaders?
Sure. I got into the military. So when I was growing up as a kid, all I wanted to do was be a fighter pilot and an astronaut. And so I spent most of my middle school and high school career trying to prepare myself to go to the Air Force Academy or go into the Air Force for another means. So I ended up doing ROTC at Boston University, got commissioned to the Air Force in 1995. And one of the things about the military, and I think it's true of a lot of organizations, we all get in for our own reasons because we want to get something out of it. But a lot of us stay for different reasons. We stay because we're having an impact. I stayed mainly, one, because we were doing really, really important work. And two, I found that my proudest moments, my most satisfying moments in the military were when I were helping the younger leaders coming up behind me, when I was helping them grow to be successful. Not what I achieved on my own, but what my really proudest moments, my most impactful moments, I think, were when I helped a younger leader grow into being a successful leader. And so that was a lot of my career, doing engineering, doing flight testing, doing rapid prototyping and fielding of capabilities, taking teams all over the world, and not just taking them all over the world and leading them, but building those future leaders who were then taking those teams out while I would be back in Colorado or somewhere else. And they'd be out running their own project out somewhere else in the world. And we would only get to talk to them maybe once or twice a day. They'd go, some of these places were so remote, they'd have to be out there, finding they'd have to come back to where they were staying from the project site. And we'd get to talk to them by phone maybe once or twice a day. So we really had to turn people into confident, autonomous leaders who could go lead a very important and sensitive project without a lot of standing over the shoulder supervision.
Yeah.
And that's rare even in the military. So that's what kind of led to me starting this company, is I wanted to bring those lessons of how do you create these autonomous leaders who really embrace a culture of initiative and accountability and innovation to solve a problem and get a project done, and bring that out to companies everywhere to create their culture of leadership and help those companies grow into really successful companies.
Yeah, that's amazing, man, because then you keep having so much more impact throughout your career as a result of training all these leaders. How did you end up in Las Vegas itself? Did you serve like a creech or anything like that? Or how did you end up in Vegas?
Yeah, I was stationed here. So my third assignment in the Air Force was here in Las Vegas. I was stationed here from 2002 to 2007. Really loved my time here. It was a really intense and demanding job, but I loved the community. I loved living here. I loved the 320 days of blue sky every year. It gets hot in the summer, but that's everything else is totally worth it. When you can sit by your pool in February, reading the newspaper and having coffee, it's totally worth it. So,
Absolutely.
So I love it here. Vegas will probably always be my home base for the company, even if I go off and do things other places. But it's a fantastic community, and what's really exciting now. Started about the time I moved back here. When I got out of the Air Force, I still had my house here, so I moved back here for a lot of practical reasons, but kind of fell in love with the community all over again in Las Vegas, and got involved in this tech community here, the startup community here, the veterans community here, and most folks know, if you're paying attention to Las Vegas, from outside of Las Vegas, you're seeing all the things, big resorts getting built, major sports teams moving here, big entertainment options. Well, Las Vegas is really blowing up in a lot of ways. What most people may not know about is we have this really vibrant small business community, which you know from living here, but we also have a small but growing and exciting tech and startup community, and our veterans community kind of straddles, is spread out over all of those things. So it's a really exciting time where a lot of communities are starting to coalesce around this goal, this vision of making Vegas something more than just what most people think it is from outside.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I remember when I first moved in to Vegas, that was my perception of Vegas, was like this strip, right? And not realizing there's a whole community outside of it, which I learned after I lived there for 5 years, which it was amazing. And it's funny that you mentioned the weather too, because I remember my first Super Bowl Sunday, I was like in shorts and a t-shirt, and I was like, oh man, I could get used to this coming from New York, Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. So tell me about the CEO mindset in general. What are some things that CEOs typically think about?
The important thing to understand about CEOs is CEOs are responsible for success or failure in every aspect, right? Whatever the company or organization, if you're talking about a nonprofit or a for-profit company, or even someone who's at a senior leadership level in a government organization, when you are at that executive level, when you are that CEO or CEO equivalent, you are responsible for success or failure. You are accountable for success or failure, period. And there's a lot of people use those words interchangeably. There's some slight differences, some subtle differences between accountability and responsibility, but you are the one who's accountable as a CEO.
Got it.
If you do not perform, if you perform, the success is going to be wild, right? If you don't perform, the failure is going to be dramatic. And CEOs even report usually to a board of directors or some kind of board who represent the other stakeholders, whether they're shareholders, other investors, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, a board brings in a CEO, or a CEO rises to be the CEO of a company, or is brought in from the outside because people are looking to them to be the one to lead this team, whether it's 4 or 5 people or thousands of people, to success. Yeah. And that's what a CEO always has to be thinking about, is how do I lead this team to achieve our objectives and keep increasing our success week after week, month after month, year after year.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I see that a lot of people, even if they're not in a leadership role, they still are leading themselves and maybe their families. And I feel like if they think like a CEO, they can apply that to their personal lives. And we're going to talk about some of those things that CEOs use as strategies to keep themselves accountable. But I love the concept of you're the boss, but you're still responsible to a board and shareholders. So you can think of yourself that way as well. Well, you're responsible to your families, your peer group, your community, and so on. So there are certain things that you can kind of think like a CEO and apply that in your personal life, your personal finances. So yeah, let's talk about some of those actually. How does a CEO think? Tell me some of the...
Well, one thing I want to hit, because you brought it up, you talked about accountable to your peers, you talked about peer groups, you talked about there are informal leaders in every organization, right? Even if you're not officially in charge of people, and we all know these people, right? They're usually the charismatic, they're usually the funny people, they're usually they're like what they're the ones people look for when when something gets proposed, they don't always look at the boss. They look at this person and see if they're on board with it or not, right? And we all fill that role to varying degrees, whether it's in our workplace or our personal life or whatever, where there's always someone looking to us to see what we think, right? And so if we choose to be cavalier about that, people are going to follow those cues, right? They may not get on board with an initiative because we're a little lukewarm about it and we're not afraid of letting people know that. But if we think like a leader and how our actions influence others, even if we're not officially in charge of anyone, that gives us a whole new perspective of, this other group of people is looking to me. They're looking to see how I react to this. Maybe I want to be a little more conscious about my reaction because I want to make sure I'm a team player and helping our organization meet our objectives instead of maybe unconsciously hindering it.
Yeah, I could see how important that could be when maybe in periods of transition, a lot of us were impacted. Let's say during the pandemic, some people had to switch careers even, right? Jobs, maybe even move to another state, and just conveying that vision and being able to say, hey, here's what I think is best. Here are the next steps I want to take. And you propose those confidently, people are going to get on board, right? Whether it's your family and so on. So I like that.
Yeah. So thinking like a CEO. So first off, CEOs always thinking about success, right? And they're thinking about what are the big picture things we need to accomplish to be successful. So for a for-profit company, that's usually revenue and profit. We have a certain profit margin we want to make. We have a certain revenue goals we need to hit. They've got a whole team to help them do the analysis to figure out what those should be. But that's it. That's what a CEO is thinking about. What are our goals? Creating those goals, because somebody's got to create them. That's a big challenge. And there are companies out there where there's not a lot of strategic guidance, where no one has really stepped up and said, this is what our goals need to be this year. This is what our goals need to be for the next 5 years. And then here are the big milestones we need to meet. Because the CEO is not going to get down and roll up their sleeves and do all the little steps to make those things happen. The CEO's got a C-suite around them, a chief operations officer, a chief marketing officer, a chief finance officer, hopefully a chief human resources officer, instead of somewhere lower in the organization, thinking about human capital and people and leadership development. But they've got this team and they're going to go, okay, here are the big picture goals. C-suite folks, what are you going to do? What's your contribution to meet these goals, right? What do we need in terms of human capital? What don't we have in order to meet this goal? Finance, how are we going to track this? Because finance is like your report card, right? Finance is your scorecard in a business. You and I both know you can look at the financials of a company and you can tell exactly where the problems are in the rest of the company just by looking at their financials. Operations, right? That's the core of what we do. That's our core competency. What do we need to change, improve, update in order to meet these new strategic goals that the CEO has come up with? And the CEO's job is to make sure, one, that all those people in the C-suite and underneath them have what they need to do their jobs. But a CEO's also got to inspire them to get on board with the goals. Inspire them to say things like, I know that's the goal, but I think we can do better than that. And here's how we're going to get there. C-suite folks, vice presidents, all the way down to your frontline managers, all need to be self-starters to some degree. They all need to be able to see a problem and say, I can do it better. And that's really thinking like a CEO. I'm going to create a new goal today. I see something that can be done better. I'm going to create a new goal today to make that better. I'm going to figure out how to measure it. And then I'm going to get my team on board, whether you're all the way at the top or you're a frontline manager or you're just working on the front line and you see something to fix. Set a goal, make a plan, figure out how to measure it, and then go forth and execute and bring the people on board that you need to execute it. That's what CEOs are thinking about. That's what good CEOs are thinking about. Always focused on everything that we are doing, is it's somehow contributing to achieving those strategic objectives. And if it's not, we shouldn't be doing it. And if we're missing something necessary to achieve those strategic objectives, we got to figure out how to get it.
Yeah, I love that vision, how it is applied to a team approach. And I think that individuals can do that in their families, right? Like a lot of us, I want to go back to goals, right? How important goal setting is. A lot of us make the mistake of only setting goals during New Year's, right? It's very common to have all these New Year's resolutions. They're really just wishes, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine CEOs did that, right? Their only goals for the company came out once a year at the beginning of the year, and then they just start dying off in mid-February, right? The gyms are packed in January, maybe mid-February, they start getting empty, right?
Gets a little thinner by about the end of January, right?
Yeah. So I also like how you mentioned the accountability part and using like your C-suite, right? So at which point, because you mentioned having a way to measure it, right? So that's a key part, like in personal finances, where if you say, okay, I'm going to retire in 10, 15 years, right? You speak with a financial planner, you figure out whatever your number is. Okay, I need to have X amount of dollars by the time I retire, my 401k, whatever. Then you got to work backwards and say, okay, well, for me to have this many dollars when I retire, I need to start saving this much now. And it becomes a thing that you do very small, right? Like every single paycheck, I'm going to put 10% of my paycheck into my 401k, right? It could be a very small decision that compounds over time. And then you get to enroll people as part of your C-suite, whether it's a financial advisor, it could be your spouse that can give you support. Maybe you check in and have money dates once a month and say, hey, how are we doing? Did we contribute to the 401k? Did we make the payment to this credit card and so on, right? And have those conversations. Because like you said, the lifeblood of that company is going to be the finances. You can see where the problems are, right? So tell me a little bit about accountability, because sometimes if you are in the leadership role, how do you keep yourself accountable? Is it mostly to yourself, or do you have someone or an entity that you kind of like check in? I know the CEO has like shareholders. How can we do that, let's say, as individuals or smaller companies that maybe don't have shareholders, to just keep accountable and keep measuring things, or even decide if something makes sense to continue to try to do, or maybe think of a different way to maybe pivot to achieve the goal in a different manner?
That's a fantastic question. So I think a lot of people watching this probably have families or businesses that they have a vested interest in financial security and a financial future in. And so just like your CEO has a board, you have a family. Those are your stakeholders. Those are your shareholders if you've got a family that you're trying to raise, a family that you're trying to take care of. Or if you've got a small business, those employees that you brought on and invested your time and emotion into to make them successful, they're a little bit like your shareholders as well, right? You hopefully feel some kind of commitment to them to try to provide them with a professional future and make sure they're taken care of in their personal life through the way you offer them pay and benefits. So there are those external things that can help you stay motivated, right? Who am I doing this for? Sometimes we're just doing it for ourselves. So, that's why I started a business. I wanted to take on this challenge. I wanted to have impact in the world, but that was just for me. And so that's my touchstone, is when things get difficult or when I'm facing a challenge, I say, is this challenge moving me forward towards the kind of impact I want to make? Right? If I go through and I try to solve the problem this way, is it taking me closer towards the impact I want to make, or is it taking me further away from that? And so there are things I've decided to stop doing. There are things I've decided to stop participating in because it was just frustration that wasn't moving me closer towards that goal of having impact in the world. Right? Same thing with finances. Going back to that whole CEO idea, right? CEOs are always thinking about, how do we measure success? What is our goal and how do we measure success on it, right? And you go to your, if your financial advisor is your CFO or your chief investment officer for your personal finances, one of the questions you should be asking them is, how are we measuring success here? And hopefully they come to you and talk about something like, well, we look at the market, but that's really kind of a lagging indicator. That's not really going to tell us much about what you're going to have. That tells us what we have right now at the end of today when the market closed, but it's not telling us anything about the future. But leading indicators like, this is how much you're investing every month. This is how much you're putting aside. These are the different kinds of things you're putting into. Those are those leading indicators. So that's something that you want to, whenever you're talking to anyone, whether it's your financial advisor or someone on your team, and they're helping you be successful at something, they're helping you achieve some kind of goal, you either need to have a very solid idea of how you're going to measure success, Or even better, take your idea of how to measure success and ask them how they're measuring success to meet your goals, and put that together into the measurements you need to be successful.
Yeah, I love that idea of measuring success. It's so important to not just like set it and forget it, right? Like you want to go back to see how you're actually doing towards your goals, and if you need to make any changes, right? Because otherwise you won't know if you're being successful.
Absolutely. That's the thing is, so setting the measurements is important, following up on them, and then comparing them to where you think you ought to be at on those goals are. And if you're finding that the plan isn't working out, it's not delivering what you were looking for, it might be time to either come up with a new plan or come up with a new measurement, right? And you don't want to just willy-nilly change these things. You want to look at these things as they trend over time. But sometimes the plan doesn't work out like expected. Sometimes it goes slower than expected. Sometimes it goes slower than expected, then it shoots up. So it's really important to be patient when you're looking at when you have any kind of goal and you're tracking it and you're measuring it. It's really important to be patient to see, are you on the pace? Are you below the pace? Are you above the pace? But are you still moving towards the goal? And when you're not moving towards the goal anymore is when it's time to start thinking about maybe what we're doing isn't, assuming that the goal is a good one, assuming that you're not just going to throw out the goal, but are we doing what we need to do, and then continue making changes and then continue to measure. But you don't want to be whipsawing back and forth making changes every day. You want to be very deliberate about when you measure, how you measure, and then what decisions you allow yourself to make based on the data set that you have so far. My recommendation is, if you're still moving towards the goal and it's still a good goal to go after, you might make small changes to what you're doing, but don't make big changes. Again, that's what a CEO thinks about is how well are we doing on the way to our goals? If we're not on the pace, what's keeping us from being on the pace? And what changes do we make?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about not checking certain things every day. I'm sure some things are worthwhile measuring daily, but things like investments are probably not, right? Like you don't want to log into your 401k every single day and see how it did. I mean, I know some people that actually do this.
It'll make you crazy.
Yeah.
It'll make you crazy. So
yeah, because you're actually looking at something that
not one you want to look at every day.
Yeah, that's not something that you could control, right? So like you're just gonna drive yourself nuts, right? So maybe look at it quarterly or twice a year or something. Rebalance your portfolio with your investment manager or your financial planner. Certain things for sure you should look at daily, right? Depending on what the action is, because there are certain things like if you're trying to lose weight, right? And you want to do 5 workouts a week, then yeah, you're going to look at that every day. Hey, did I go to the gym today? Did I do my sets?
Right. Leading indicators versus lagging indicators, right? Weighing yourself is easy to do every day, but it only tells you what's happened in the past, right? It doesn't tell you where you're going. But that today I went to the gym. Yesterday I went to the gym. Today I went to the gym. I did 2 of my 5 days this week. That's telling me I'm on the pace, as long as I'm keeping up the intensity of my workout and I'm eating right and drinking water and getting sleep and all those kinds of things. Living to those commitments is what's going to get me there. And measuring, am I living to my commitments? Am I following the plan? Tells me more than what my weight tells me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's more of a snapshot and it just reflects what's done in the past. I like that. Where does motivation play into all this? Do CEOs consider motivation as a factor, or is it more habitual? How does that, because I'm thinking certain people, like in my case, when I think of motivation, some days I'm not motivated. Like there are days that I don't really want to do certain things, like work out. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I'm still going to do it, right? But you got to push through. And I think maybe it goes back to the why that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, the most successful people, whether they're CEOs or whatever else, right? The most successful people have developed some focus and some discipline over time. And so they find that strength, they find that discipline to get up and go to the gym every day, right? They find the strength to sit down and look through that spreadsheet of measurements to see how we're doing, right? Nobody likes to look through spreadsheets, or very few people, right?
Very few.
is even numbers guys like you and me, it's not our favorite thing to do to dig through the numbers and to look for the trends and to make graphs and that kind of stuff. So it's there's a little bit, if you're looking for your why to keep you going every day, that's got to be a really strong why. That's got to be a really impactful why. And even then, the most dedicated people to big, lofty goals that are going to change the world, have a huge impact on the world, they have days where they need to find the strength to get up and just turn the crank on doing the things that are not fun to keep moving forwards towards a goal. So there are a lot of days I get up and remind myself, I just have to remind myself, it's get up, do this work, turn the crank, and then we're going to do that again tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
But
no. I like that you mentioned
every
discipline.
day is what moves you towards your goals, not sitting and thinking about how awesome it will be when I get there.
Right. And I like that you mentioned discipline, because sometimes people think discipline as a bad thing, like you're being punished, right? Like discipline is punishment. Like you think of, maybe like military training or something.
Yep. During
boot camp, right? And but it's not in that sense. It's more of creating those habits that you're just going to do whether you feel like it or not, right? So that you're not relying on willpower and motivation.
Right. Yeah. You only have so much willpower every day. There's studies that show that. You can go find the research. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we all hit a wall every day on our willpower, right? So, having the discipline to set up a plan for the day and stick to it really helps us when our willpower isn't there for that particular day. And yeah, discipline can be an ugly word sometimes. And, it's interesting. I kind of use self-discipline and discipline interchangeably, just because after a career in the military, discipline is so ingrained into me that I don't think of it as self-discipline. I just think of it as discipline, right? I have the discipline to go do something,
right?
To go turn that crank every day. And accountability is another word that people get confused about. And I like to think of accountability and discipline as attributes for ourselves, not attributes to worry about in other people. Right. Gotcha. A lot of people talk about accountability, but only in the context of we're going to hold people accountable. And they're not really talking about holding people accountable, finding a way to help them be accountable to themselves, to be accountable to the group, to be accountable to complete what the commitments they've agreed to commit up to. When most people talk about accountability, they're talking about there need to be consequences for somebody's actions because I don't like what they did.
Right.
That's a view of accountability that is going to set us up for failure every time. When we think about accountability, we always have to think about ourselves and the accountability we accept, and then the discipline to stick to the commitments we make to reach that accountability. And then when it comes to dealing with others, having those conversations of, okay, you've agreed to be accountable for this. How are you going to hold yourself accountable for this? How are you going to take accountability for this? Not be held accountable, not have consequences put on you for not doing something. It's a subtle difference, but I think the idea of taking accountability is a much healthier way to view accountability and discipline than holding other people accountable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you for breaking that down. I think that is like you said, subtle difference, but a major one and very important. How do you apply that to mistakes then? Because obviously the plan doesn't always go accordingly, right? There's going to be some situations where things don't go according to plan, or maybe we make an error and we need to pivot. How do we apply that when it comes to accountability? How do the CEOs think about like, okay, we made this mistake in terms of like moving forward?
And that comes down to accountability and discipline as well. And, when a CEO sees that something under their purview, there's a mistake that's been made, good CEOs will say, okay, a mistake has been made. I may not be the one who made the mistake, but I am the one who's accountable. So it's my job to make sure this gets corrected. And now, if you've got a really good culture of accountability in your organization, when the person who made that mistake or the first person who catches that mistake sees it, they're going to instantly spring into action to go, okay, let's recognize the mistake. Let's own the mistake. Let's see how we correct this mistake, if it's even correctable. Sometimes they're not. And that's important to admit to ourselves as well. If we can't correct from this, we can only fix what's going to happen in the future, right?
Yeah.
So that's where that accountability comes in. So CEOs will go to the board and say, okay, this is what happened. Of course, it's on me. Here are the steps that, before they even go tell them about the mistake, they've already figured out the path to fix it. And that's the best thing we all can do as individuals. If we make a mistake, if we get ourselves into trouble, to figure out, can I get myself out of trouble on this? Can I fix this mistake? Or if I can't fix this mistake, how can I keep this from happening in the future? And then going to the next person we need to tell and say, here's what happened. Here's how I've got it covered.
I love the concept of taking ownership, because you're basically saying, okay, I'm responsible, I'm accountable, I'm learning from this. We all make mistakes. So it's completely fine that, some of us may have gotten ourselves into debt. Maybe we made an impulse purchase. We made a rash decision on something. And don't beat yourself down. You can't cry with spilled milk. Learn from it. And like you said, how do we avoid this going forward? Even if it wasn't you that made the mistake. So going back to the family dynamic, right? It may say one of the spouses made an impulse buy, didn't consult with the other, and the money may have been allocated for something else. And that created some, particular strain in the family dynamic. You can say, look, that's fine. Going forward, I think we can create some rules, some boundaries regarding, even small things like, all right, any purchase over $100, we have to, consult with each other about, just to make sure that we're not, doing something that's going to negate something that we're trying to accomplish, right? Because then I feel like it helps you then figure out the actions that you need to take. And like you said, kind of figuring out before you even show the problem. You say, look, here's what happened. Here's what I'm doing about it, right? And here's what I'm doing so that it doesn't happen again. And I think that helps, right? Overall.
Absolutely. And recognizing, even if we were not the one who made a mistake, asking ourselves very honestly, what was my role? Did I have a role in this happening, right? If I'm a supervisor and something I'm a CEO or I'm a supervisor and someone who reports to me made a mistake, did I have a role in that? Were they trained, in the corporate world, in the military, we ask, were they trained properly? Did they know the rules? Was there a gray area? Was there not a process in place? All of those things. We ask ourselves, what was our role in it? And then how do we correct this? It doesn't necessarily change the outcome or how things will be handled for the individual who made the mistake. Same thing in a family or a personal relationship. What was my role? If we overdrafted the bank account because we both wrote big checks, well, what was my role? Did I not tell the other person that I was going to write this big check, or did they not tell me? Did we pass like ships in the night, both thinking that everything was fine, right? So that's always a self-evaluation, a self-reflection question, a self-awareness question that in any situation, a good CEO will ask, what was my role as the CEO in making this happen or allowing this to happen? And answering that honestly. If the answer is no, all of our procedures were in place. Everyone was given the guidance and instructions, and this is just someone who didn't follow it. Then our role as a CEO is say, okay, now it's my job to correct this.
Yeah. And I like the fact that you mentioned self-awareness, because I feel like I wanted to ask you about the CEO mentality when it comes to knowing his strengths and weaknesses. I would imagine that most CEOs, if not all, are probably lifelong learners, continuing to own their skills, right? And work on improving their weaknesses and even making their strengths even better. How do you feel about that in terms of the CEO mindset when it comes to continuing to learn and strengthen your communication and just in general, your overall knowledge, just knowing what skills you need or who do you need to hire that has the set of skills that you need to fit into that vision?
I don't think you'll find a big company CEO out there who's not a lifelong learner, not a self-starter, not someone who says either I need to learn this skill because it's important to fulfill my responsibilities in my future, or who, and more likely in the case of CEO, who's the person who knows how to do this that I need to get. I don't think you'll find a CEO or someone who's running a successful company at any level who is not doing that to some degree as well. And yeah, communication skills, super important for a CEO. We talk about that vision. That vision starts at the top. One of the things that's really important is for every person in an organization, again, whether there's 5 of you or thousands, tens of thousands, everyone needs to know how their role contributes to achieving that vision. And the only way to do that is for the CEO to tell the C-suite, here's the vision. Here's how all of your roles contribute to it. This is what I expect from you to contribute to this vision. Then all those C-suite officers need to go tell all of their teams, here's how what you're doing is contributing to the big picture. Without you, we can't do this. Here's what I need. Here are the challenges I need you to go accept in order to make this happen for the larger company, the larger organization. How are you going to go and meet this challenge? And that conversation has to be handed all the way down to the very front line. Something like 90% of employees in major companies don't understand how their job impacts the big picture of the company.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
It's from a few years ago, but it's a depressing statistic. But that's on us as leaders. That's on us as CEOs. If every person in our organization doesn't understand how what they do contributes to the big picture, that's on us. Somewhere there's been a failure of leadership that person doesn't know. And that's important for two reasons. One, we want them to be able to work and play nice and cooperate with others, right? But this is really important because what most people are really looking for from their workplace experience, and you can read all the articles about this, it's been a big topic lately. Employees are looking to work for a company that provides them with meaning in their life. They want to do work that has meaning. If you don't know how what you do fits into the big picture, there's no way you can have meaning. There can be meaning to what you do. And that's on us as leaders to make sure that that's communicated and that every single person on our team understands that their work has meaning and they contribute to something larger than themselves.
I like that too, because I could see how families can even apply that to the kids too, and let them know their role and how their actions impact the overall family goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Especially when it comes to something like chores, right? Or even just going to school. Look, your job in the family is to go to school and do well in school. And here's how that contributes to the big picture of the family, right? You have chores to do. Yeah, I'm an adult man. It's probably easier for me to take the trash out than it is for my 7-year-old to do it, right?
Right.
But they're learning something valuable by doing that. And we're contributing to the goals of the family to all work together, cooperate, collaborate, and back each other up. And we're creating a culture here where when something needs to get done, we step up and do it, and we support each other when we need help.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that help has to come from the outside. And that's when you have to have, know enough when you don't know something, right? Like know what you don't know. And that could be something as simple as reading a book, listening to a podcast, asking someone else for help, right? In the case of professional world, let's say personal finances, hiring a financial planner. There's so much information out there, right? That if you don't know something, you have to reach out to somebody that does know it, or read a book, listen to a podcast, something, so that you can learn the skills you need to do to help you achieve those goals, right? And maybe even serve as an accountability partner, because sometimes you may have no one to help you in that regard.
Absolutely. We are living in a time where it has never been easier or cheaper to learn something. I am a huge believer in public libraries. So
yeah.
Right. Go get your library card. Just about any book you want to read is available as an ebook from your local public library. So the only time you may ever have to go down to the library is to actually go pick up your library card and get it activated so you can rent ebook or borrow ebooks from the library. But what's great about that is borrow the book, read it or read part of it. That will give you a real clear idea of, is this something that I can learn for myself or should learn for myself, or should I look for someone who's a pro to handle this for me? Yeah. That's thinking like a CEO, right? I'm confronted with something new. I'm going to learn a little bit about it, whether that's me as a CEO or my team going and gathering information. And then I'm going to make a decision. Do we continue to pursue this? Do I figure this out? Do I go learn this skill myself? Or do I bring a pro in? Because I'm going to trade that money for time, right? I don't want to put the time into it, but I'm going to give somebody some money to go do all those things like a financial advisor does. Because I don't want to sit in the computer and do the paperwork.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can apply that to a whole bunch of stuff, right? Even like your own health, like you said, information is available, right? You can go online, let's say you're having certain symptoms, right? You do some searches, you figure out, okay, this looks like what I have. But at some point you gotta reach out to a professional.
One of the coolest businesses, rapidly growing businesses I've seen here in Las Vegas is a young woman. She's got a meal prep company.
Nice.
She's very into fitness. She was a fitness competitor. And a few years ago, she started a meal prep company and she's doing gangbusters with it because people are realizing I can either do all the shopping, I can learn how to cook these healthy meals, I can take the time to cook them, or I can go to this company and pay them. And then every Monday I get my week's worth of meals and I just put them in my fridge and I microwave them or whatever it is. And now I have freed up my time to go focus on those other things that are important to me as the CEO of my life to do. I've got someone who handles my meals. Right now, it's not cheap, but when you look at the time you would have to put into learning how to cook the meals, cooking the meals, packaging up the meals, storing the meals, that may be the right answer for somebody.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, how worth is it spending all Sunday doing all that stuff, right? As opposed to paying someone else.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people spend their whole weekend doing their meal prep, or they buy all the stuff. And then it gets to be Sunday. They go, I'm too tired to do it. I worked all week. I'm too tired to do it. And so the stuff either sits or they, and they end up throwing it out. Or now every night they're cooking a meal. So,
I'm glad you bring this up. This is a great segue too, because I wanted to ask you about just the CEO mindset when it comes to self-care. Because I would imagine you have so much responsibility, right? And you're overlooking so many things that a big component of the CEO mindset is also knowing when to say no, right? As part of just staying on track towards their goals, and also for their own mental health, right? And their physical health, right? So how important is it to have that mindset when it comes to also keeping your health a priority so that you are the best you can be to continue to be the leader that you need to be for yourself, your family, or your business?
I think it's absolutely critical. We went through a long stretch here for about a decade where it was people were keeping score of how great they were by how many hours they worked. And that's still kind of going on to some degree, but I'm seeing, especially in the startup community for rapidly growing startups, there's more and more pushback on that of, let's be productive. Let's not work till 3 a.m. or
I only sleep 3 hours. That was like a badge of honor.
Yeah. The saying that someone said to me in the Air Force when I was a young captain was, I only expect you to work 9 to 5. What you do with the other 4 hours is your business.
Terrible.
And they were half joking. And there are times, there are going to be times in your life, and I think you and I have talked about this. There are going to be times in your life when, especially if you're the founder of a business or you're a CEO or you're doing something that's really important to you, that's having a big impact, you're going to have to put in a lot of hours. But what you want to do is you want to prepare yourself for those days. And that's why it's important to eat right, to get exercise, to get some sleep, to take time off, to be with your family and friends, to take that time to recharge so that you are prepared when those things come along. And I think most CEOs are probably pretty good at doing this. But most CEOs, speaking for myself, I don't think of the day as the workday. I think of the day as a 24-hour period. And I have a bunch of things I want to get done, and I'm going to figure out how to do them in that 24-hour period, right? So about 7 hours of sleep is important to me. So there's 7 hours right there, right? But kind of other than that, my day is really in flex. And some days, like today, we're doing this. I've got a bunch of meetings. I'm not planning on getting a lot of work done on the computer, which meant I had to do a bunch yesterday, and I'm going to be doing a bunch tomorrow. So it's kind of thinking about thinking like a CEO. What are the priorities, and how am I going to fit it all in? And I think CEOs are really good at doing this, but they're not always really good at showing that this is what they're doing. Right? They're not showing to their team, their big company of 10,000 people. Yeah, I'm in the gym at 9 p.m. Right. And then I'm back in my office after I'm at the gym. Right.
Wow.
So because I'm getting all these things done. Right. So and then I'm in bed at midnight because I want to get up at 6 I got to do it all over again. Right. But that's why Yeah. So I think I think really great leaders are usually really good at doing this for themselves. They're not always great at setting this example, and that's what I'd like to hear more of is really successful people, whether they're CEOs or not, talking about this is how I set my priorities, and this is how I manage my priorities. This is how I really get it all done. They're not always great at setting the example and showing how they do this, how they set priorities, how they make these decisions, and showing that they balance choices off, and they put certain priorities above others, but that's a moving target, right? Depending on what's going on. And one of the issues I really have when people talk about work-life balance is that people think there's some magic formula to how you arrange your day on your calendar. And if you just arrange your day correctly, there's a perfect day that if you just do that over and over again, you'll have work-life balance. And it really doesn't work that way. If you really want to make impact in the world, there are going to be days where you're going to have to be completely focused on making that impact. But that's why it's important to make time for your friends and family, to go on that vacation, to make time to get to the gym, to make time to get sleep, to make time to make sure you're drinking enough water, to make sure you're eating right, so that those periods of time that come where you're focused 24, 48, 72 hours on minimal sleep, trying to get something done like a new product launch or something like that, that you're prepared for it, and that you have the ability to unwind from it afterwards. And like I said, CEOs, I think, are very good at this. I'd like to see more of them talk about, here's how I do it, so that they're setting an example for their folks of, look, there's going to be days when I ask you to give a lot. So make sure you're setting your life up in a way where you're prepared for that. And then when we're done asking you to give a lot, we're going to try to set it up so you can take that time for yourself as well. Yeah.
I think you bring up a great point about not having or expecting that perfect day all the time, because life happens and things, you can paint the perfect picture in your calendar. I've done this myself. I have all these time blocks, like I'm going to answer emails from this hour to this hour and then call, it doesn't always happen that way. And then some days when you're trying to accomplish something, you just got to go harder. So there might be some 10, 12-hour days there, but I could appreciate how, you mentioned that work-life balance doesn't necessarily need to be like the same thing every single day, the perfect calendar. Some days you're going to have to give more. But I love how you're mentioning how CEOs should show that that's also a priority and how they do it, because people can also show, hey, listen, we're all working hard. You're telling your kids to go to school, you're working, your spouse is working, you're putting food on the table. But there's also times when we're going to go on that vacation as well. There's times where we're going to be able to buy our first home and now have more room, if that's one of your goals, right? So there's a reward for everything. There are times when you need to put in more than other days. So I really like that concept.
Yeah. As a leader, it's really important to set that example. If you're thinking like a CEO, it's important to think about, what's the example I'm setting? If you're walking out of the office at 3 a.m. and you're looking around and you're seeing a lot of people working really late, and you're saying to yourself, I wonder why they're working so late. It might be time to have a conversation about, hey, why are you guys working so late? We don't have a big thing coming up. And, I remember I had an Air Force assignment where we had a general who wouldn't leave till like 8 or 9 at night. And there were folks who thought they couldn't leave until he left.
Right. I mean, I could see that. If the general's there, I'm like, I'm going to stay in.
They were making up stuff to do for 4 or 5 hours every night.
Oh my God.
Which isn't a problem if you make up stuff for yourself to do. The problem is when you start making up stuff and coming up with ideas and sending it out to everybody else saying, okay, now you need to do this because I had to make something up.
Right.
That's a problem.
It impacts everybody. Yeah, no, this has been great, Jason. I thank you so much. I wanted to ask you first, before I let you go, where can we find you on social media? We'll share all the links on the show notes and also when we post the episode as well. But just for people listening, where can they find you?
Yeah, we are on Facebook, LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So either reach out to me there personally or through the company. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. Those are all Evil Genius Leadership. So just search on Evil Genius Leadership and you'll find them. And if you search on it, it's good for our search results. So do me that favor and search for us. But we are at Evil Genius Leadership on all of those. Twitter, we are at Evil Genius Lead, mainly because when I created that Twitter account, there was a character limit on how long your handle could be. So it's at Evil Genius Lead. That's the only one that's different. And we're not on Snapchat or TikTok or anything like that. But one of the things I'm excited about is we haven't done much with the YouTube channel over the last 4 or 5 years. And so I'm really excited. We're creating new content for the YouTube channel, and that should start coming out in just about 2 or 3 weeks. You should start seeing brand new, what I think is really great content coming out on our YouTube channel. So there's going to be things talking about the business. We're going to be interviewing folks from Las Vegas and beyond, folks who are really making an impact in what they do, both the impact they're making and how they are showing up as great leaders as well. So I'm excited to share that with everybody. So, and then look for us online, evilgeniusleadership.com, and you can see some of the things we offer as a company, some of the training workshops we do for companies and corporate training, some of the digital courses we have if you're interested in doing one of our digital courses just on your own, and more to follow on that. That's we're constantly updating that and trying to make that better.
Amazing, man. I'm very proud of what you've built and just knowing you all these years and seeing you build this company by yourself. It's been amazing. Wanted to ask you, if you were in an elevator with a complete stranger and you're probably there for like a 30 to 60 second ride, let's say Las Vegas, right? One of the resorts. And when they stop at their floor, they're getting off, they don't know who you are or how to find you. What are some things that you would like to share with them that you've learned throughout your life that are some values or some just wisdom that you would like to pass on?
Elevator pitch for wisdom. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. I like it. It's a good exercise. Have a vision. Have something you want to accomplish in life. Have a goal. It's very difficult some days to keep going without having that goal. Develop your focus and discipline, right? It's hard some days, even when you have a great goal, to get up and turn that crank and do the things you need to do every day. So stay focused, stay disciplined. Set a good example. Be conscious that people are always watching you and that there is someone who will see what you're doing and they will go, that's an example I should follow. So be conscious of how other people see you and your actions and your words. If you don't like the way you're perceived, when you realize how other people perceive you, and if they're following your lead, what they're doing, be conscious about the changes you make. But that's it. Have a vision. Be as disciplined. Develop that discipline, and be conscious of the example you set for other people.
I love it. Thank you. Words of wisdom. Appreciate you sharing that with us, man. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time to be here. I will be sharing all of your social media and website links in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And be sure to follow Jason and Evil Genius Leadership and check out all the offerings that he has, digital courses. Even if you're not a business owner, I think the leadership traits that you will learn there is something that you can apply to your personal lives for the better. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation. Thank you.